Hello, Biz Catalyst 360 and Northern Lights Publishing welcome you to RoundTable 360 with your host and moderator, Joseph Carabas. RoundTable 360 brings together people in the creative fields, dancers, thespians, poets, actors, musicians, authors, and others from across the globe in conversation about things that are relevant, irrelevant, serious, and fun. Today's episode is Artistic Intent. Is it more important audiences get our meaning or we pay our bills? The discussion is led by Poledancer, poet, and author Kenneth Weene. Today's guests include London-based fantasy and alternative history author Liz Tuckwell, EU-based actor, voice artist, and model Sabine Rosbach, creativity guide, expressive and experimental artist Sarah Bowden, author and apiary Amy Almedo, and a host of others. Stay with us and enjoy.
Okay. Good morning, afternoon, evening, depending on where you are. Today we're going to be talking about the intent of artists, the artistic intent. It might be to be political, it might be to get people to think differently about how we process light, painting, for example. It might be to get us thinking about God, religious topics. It might be just, the intent might be just to say, hey, sit back, snooze, and escape reality for an hour or two with my friendly little book. And so I'm going to ask people today to talk about what is the intent you have at the back of your mind or the fore of your mind when you start to create whatever it is you're creating. And just to give an example, I was going to sing the 1812 overture for you, complete with bong, 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 but which of course is historical commemoration, another intent, glorification. So anyway, what are some of your intents? Anybody want to pick it up? Goodness.
Mark, please begin.
Thank you. I'm actually I'm a professional icebreaker. Actually, Joseph and I were both in a conversation for a while just before this one. And Joseph, you left just before one of the gentlemen on the call read a definition of persona from the Merriam-Webster dictionary. And one of the definitions was a character assumed by an author of a written work. So I think if we take written out of that definition, I think that a persona can be a character assumed by any person creating a work, and that persona can reflect the motivation. And I don't think it matters what the persona is on any given occasion. I think we can write to reflect things we believe. I think we can write to reflect things we might be thinking about in the moment in which we're creating. That feels to me, to pick up on your term, Ken, that feels to me like legitimate authorial intent.
Mm-hmm. Okay. I think that's a good point. I'm just curious. We have at least one actress with us today. And now, Sabine, you, when you go onto the stage or into the film, you're dealing with all kinds of intent. You have the intent of the writer, mm-hmm. the intent of the director, the intent of the cinematographer, even. And also, I'm curious what intent you bring. Do you bring your own special notion of persona into your work? Because that's certainly, acting is as creative an act as writing.
I do. I think my overall intent with whatever I do is to connect, is to connect with the audience and to touch people in whatever way that may be, that I'm shocking the audience or amusing, or but in any way I would like to have connection, because it's always a dialogue. So that's my overall that's close to my heart with whatever I do.
You want to connect with people, especially emotionally, from the terms you use.
Totally, yeah. And I'm at best I connect with people on a level, on a very I would like to say personal, intimate level, on a level which is not public, which is not the public persona that someone shows, or I would like to reach the subconscious. I would like to trigger things. Triggering is also communication for me. It all goes under the need to connect, right? And this is my main intent, and I do whatever is necessary to reach that. And lucky am I if I have a good director who goes along. Otherwise, we'll find compromise. We'll have discussions amongst ourselves. The cast of a film or in theater, that is a lot easier because you are together for over a longer period of time, and you're creating that safe space where you can explore how to get to that point much easier than on film. But also on film you can have rehearsals or meetings beforehand, and yeah.
One of the things I've gotten myself a little addicted to, that kind of connects to the last part of what you said, is I love interviews with Daniel Radcliffe when he is talking about the Harry Potter years and how he talks about the connection that went on between the cast and how it developed and how it helped them grow as people. And then you see it in the performance, and you think about how their performance grew and how their connection to their audience grew. And I think it really speaks to what you're saying, that on film, at least, because you're connecting constantly and building that safe space, that the actor's internal character, the one that the actor is trying to, has more room. So people can relate better. And for me personally, I don't know about if I go to a play and I see it with one actor and then I see another, the one that comes to my mind is Equus, which I saw with Richard Burton and Anthony, what's his name? Oh, well. But anyway, Anthony, was it Hopkins? I don't remember.
Possibly, I don't know. When was that?
Anthony Perkins. And Perkins was so much better in the part than Burton, because Burton was not connecting with anything inside him. He was too busy connecting with the audience, trying to present, hey, I'm the great star. Whereas Perkins was totally inside his character.
You are never performing for the audience. You're never performing to be seen, or to that what you have to say is being. No, you are it is what you reach in the people. It is that which is important. It is what you reach in your audience. And as you say, as you observed very correctly, that won't happen unless you're connected to something within yourself. We had one of my tutors, Giles Foreman, that really had influenced me strongly in my decision also to do this professionally and so on. He always said, don't ever open your mouth before you're connected to something. I think that sums it up, yeah.
Of course, some of us are not just using our mouths, but generally speaking, good advice. I have to kind of go to somebody else in the panel today, because as folks, if you don't know, we meet once a month outside the show to discuss what we're going to do, those of us who are on the panel. And, it's a great group, a great discussion. And we were talking about this. topic of intent. And one of our panel, Donna, was saying some interesting to me things, so interesting that I subsequently bought one of her books. And I can't talk about the book yet because I'm still in the middle of it. I'm enjoying it. It's a great read, by the way, Donna. Thank you. But I am curious if you'd like to talk a little about what your intention is when you write, because you write what can best be termed cozy mysteries. And what is your intention?
Well, thanks for asking. I was thinking about that before we started here, and my intention is to write escape fiction or popular fiction. I've never wanted to do literature. I decided that I would have more people to read my books, and it's also what I prefer to read. But the cozy mysteries, I think I started because they weren't giving me what I was after. And what I learned with a very special moment was from Gregory MacDonald, who I admired. Fletch was one of my favorite books. And I caught him on the rail of a boat as a group of us were sailing around Manhattan. And he was by himself. So I went up to him and I said, "How do you make people laugh on page 2 and cry on page 20? And he stared off actually went to the Statue of Liberty, and he said, "Character," which told me volumes. I wanted my character to have range. So that's what I was trying to do with my cozy mysteries and have continued to do. The other thing that I think is a byproduct that you really can't aim for, but if you're lucky, you can get, is a mental connection with your reader that you might not expect. And the way I think you have to do it is describe things as perfectly as you can, as you think of them. What does that tree look like to me? Or what does your high school hallway smell like? Wax and sweat socks or something. And what has happened is a couple times readers have told me that really resonated with them. It took them back to their high school hallway, or it was a baby shower I described that resonated. And you never know when that's going to happen. But if you give me another minute, John Gardner had a moment that resonated with me. I think it was the first page of Nickel Mountain, where he has someone describing what they're thinking while it's snowing. And I thought, wow, that's exactly what I think when it's snowing. And it was just such a special moment where he was reading my mind and I was reading his. It's a kind of connection that I don't think you can aim for, but it's a very special thing when it happens.
Thank you. I think it's interesting because what you were saying and Sabine was saying in some ways resonates so closely. And the one thing that comes across to me is that we as artists, all of us, even those of us who are creating something to upset and provoke, as I often am, we also at the same time want our audience to feel safe to react, safe to be there with us. And yeah, by the way, Donna, just another quick plug for you. Okay. That's what I'm getting from your book. I feel really safe with your characters. I can care about them, I can think about them, and feel like it's safe to do that. And I love it. And Mark, you had your hand up first, I think so.
Yeah, thank you. I'm not an actor, but I play one on TV, and I wanted to follow up with Sabine on some of the things that she was saying, and I was writing a whole bunch of notes. We have in prior conversations talked about the differences between working on stage and working, I don't know if I should say on or for film. So one of the things I wondered, and one of the verbs that you used was explore, and Kenneth said something about connecting with different things. If you're in a play with recurring performances. And I grant that some of this must have to do with the latitude that the director might allow. But on successive nights or in successive performances, are your performances informed by different things? Could you have different things that you've connected with on different nights, so that if I saw you perform in a play on one night and went back to see you perform in that same play on another night, would I detect nuances there?
You would definitely would, yeah. Of course.
Wow.
Of course. That's the beauty of theater. That's the beauty of a live performance, of probably any live performance, be it in music or in acting or in dance. Is certainly, and it's a dialogue, as I often say, really with the audience. A lot of the energy that is reflected by the audience. You come in with something, or that can even start before you even get on stage. That the audience exudes something, brings you I mean, if there's 700 people sitting, sharing the same space with you, there's obviously a lot going on. And you just can't take yourself out of that equation. And it does color your performance. The what you play is not different, but how you play may differ.
I'm thinking, for example, about playing guitar. And people who play guitar talk about neuromuscular memory. And I wonder, and if you've developed that, and especially if you're in a situation in which you can improvise to some extent, you don't have to be particularly mindful about the mechanics. Is there a point in acting at which you've already become comfortable with the mechanics, and so you can engage more deeply in that, I don't know what to call it, exchange or interaction with the audience?
Totally, yeah. That ideally that happens before opening, before the opening night. That's not always possible depending on the time you have for rehearsal. But it does, and the longer you play, or I would say for me, that usually happens. I become really comfortable. Let's say after night 3. If I had a lot of rehearsal time, that may happen. That may be lying right under the nervous energy on opening night. And if I'm lucky, I don't know, I get a first laugh or a first reaction from the audience that makes me feel safe on opening night. And but there, that happens, absolutely. And the more that is in place, as you say, the cooler that gets. I mean, then you can go on impulse. I don't know. I had a play when I played this alcoholic doctor in Arsenic and Old Lace. It's a great classic comedy. I suddenly started being cross-eyed at some point. I think that was night 8 or 7 or 8. I just couldn't help it. And it was such and I was thinking, oh my gosh, should I have done this? I got the laughs, I got the whoo, I got the, and it worked. I mean, I could have gone the wrong way, but I just, these things come up and I can't help it. I go with it then. And okay, that usually that works out. As long as you stay in character, it's okay.
Thank you. I love that.
Amy?
So this is a little different. Back when medical simulation first started becoming popularized, I ran one of 45 medical simulation centers that was in the whole country. I think there's thousands now. So there was no guidebook, like here's how you do it, here's your role, here's your thing. So it was kind of like, here, go figure it out. And I specialized in high-risk birth procedures, which meant mom and or baby could have a potential to die. So it was very serious. Like there was nothing funny about what we were doing. And I had 2 kids. So I knew what it was like to be pregnant, and I'd go make myself pregnant and, do the breathing and all of that. And there was oftentimes a lot of people who didn't know me thought I was pregnant while I was walking around because I had a big belly, and they would speak softly and open my doors for me and pour water, and it was wonderful. I thought, gosh, I should be pregnant all the time, and, but then when I had to go into labor, like I was like, okay, now I have to go into labor. So I knew which muscles I was supposed to contract. I knew what I was supposed to say, but I honestly wasn't going into labor as Amy. I was going into labor as whatever character I was supposed to be for that scenario. And at one point, I was a 15-year-old heroin addict. and 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 there was an entire auditorium filled with doctors and nurses and midwives and hospital administrators. And thank God I never looked out at the audience, because I got wheeled in and they were doing it. And the doctor looks up at me and he says, "So how many minutes apart are your contractions?" And I'm a 15-year-old heroin addict. And so I yelled at him, "I don't fucking know."
Great, great.
I think that's a
Perfect.
reasonable answer, right? And the whole audience just started laughing, but I couldn't laugh because I was in labor, in a supposed hospital room and stuff. And so I had to I always had to figure out who I was as the trainer, who my character was, and then the playoff on whatever doctors. Some doctors were incredibly empathic, and some doctors were very cold and distant, and some doctors wouldn't come near you. And I had other doctors trying to rip my clothes off, and I'm giving them the eye, like, this is a simulation, like. And it was so eye-opening, and it was so cathartic, and it really helped me to understand the minds of these doctors and how they go from, like, the level 1 doctors. They come in kind of almost being human, but 4 years later, they kind of leave not being human. And so it's like, because the more emotionally attached you are to your patients, the more emotionally distraught these people would get. So they were rewarded for not being emotionally attached to you. So my primary goal was to make them stop being a doctor, start being human, and learn how to communicate with me while I was the patient on the hospital bed. It was honestly probably one of the most intriguing things I've ever done. So,
Yeah. Wow.
yeah.
Sarah, I want to bring you in on this conversation because, number one, and feel free to jump in and correct me here, you're a visual artist. Would that be correct?
Yes.
And I've seen a considerable amount of your artwork. Sarah has a Facebook page, folks, for our audience and people in the meeting, where you often display some of your artwork. And even the one you have behind you. When you are creating art, I'm gonna pick your owl series.
Mhm.
You created what I think most people would call whimsical caricatures,
Yeah.
and yet they speak so poignantly, so powerfully. When you're designing those owls, that backdrop there, when you design book covers, what is the process? Because as Sabine was saying, there's got to be something inside you, I think,
Mhm.
that
Mhm.
says this here, these lines, this perspective, this size, and to me, building on what Sabine said, that's a flow between creator and audience, I guess. But do you have I look at what you do and I'm awed by it, but I can't perceive in my head that you have your audience planned ahead of time for what you're doing. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think that there's two sort of aspects to what you're saying. There's me as an artist, and then there's me as a professional artist. So, in some respects, yes, I do have my audience very much in mind if it's a piece that I'm going to want to promote and market and think about how my audience will interact with it. But the actual process of making art is not about that, if that makes sense. It's kind of more intuitive than that. It's far more, so I might have subject matters or inspirations that feel like they've been informed to me through my audience at times. But I would say that that's a separate creative process that happens sort of afterwards. But because of what I create and how I've started creating and how I present my work, I've attracted the sort of people into my community and into my tribe, if you like, who are always going to connect with the different themes that I'm exploring, if that yeah. So I like to surprise people. I like to present these playful, whimsical, you use is a great word, on the surface as sort of not simplistic in a sort of base level, but sort of that you could just sort of think, oh, that's pretty, simplistic like that, a simplistic reaction. But actually there's a, far more depth to it. And it's very much like the art is layered. So I'm mainly an abstract artist to begin with, and then it's multi-layered across however many layers it feels right to do. And then an animal is created within that abstraction. So just like my painting has multi-layers, the meaning and the depth behind it has multi-layers as well, because we are all multi-layered and multi-dimensional, and you can't, I can't separate myself from that. I'm very much embedded in the process. And so because I am multi-textured and layered, and, my art is as well, and all the meanings and the responses will be too. Not everyone's going to love my art, of course, nobody, but I love my art. And like Sabine, if I said your name right, sorry, says, it's all about connection, and I have to have connection first of all. And I was thinking about that when Sabine was talking about connection, because that is something that is really paramount in my mind, whether I'm creating some art or whether I'm marketing my art. They're both all about connection. And I was thinking about what do I connect to? So the very first thing that I connect to is an idea. Actually, it might not necessarily be the first thing, actually. So the idea might come from, they're interchangeable. So that could be the first thing that happens, but it could also be the connection with what I'm going to sound a little bit woo-woo. Sorry for those of you who don't like this kind of thing, but I have a creative goddess who I channel. Now you can think of that as a creative energy. You can think of that as your higher self, or it could just be whatever. I'm not about, painting just a pretty picture. I couldn't recreate this even if I tried, because I can't even remember how it's done, because you're so much in a state of flow that you can't even work out what your first, second, third and fourth process was. And there is many pieces of artwork out there where there is, it can be separated out into processes, but my type of art, you can't. So I connect with my higher power, my creative goddess. I channel Bridget, the Celtic goddess of poetry and alchemy, and smithery, but it's also alchemy too, and fires and other things that healing as well. And then so I channel her creative energy, and that I can sometimes create and not, when you go for a drive and you think, well, how did I get from here to there? And you're on autopilot and you can't even remember anything. That can sometimes be the way that it happens. And then out of the abstraction, my owl, usually owls, big on owls at the moment, or any other animal starts to emerge. So it could be the intuitive process of painting, just laying the paint down, inks, pastels. I use all types of materials, collage, and then something emerges. Or I start with the theme, and at the moment I'm looking at the mother archetype, and I'm thinking about the 4 aspects of the mother archetype, but I'm still painting owls, and they still look whimsical, and they're still textured and multi-layered, and but the theme was what started it, and so that informs a lot of the process too. But it's got to be a connection first with the creative energy, then with myself, and then the story unfolds, and then I can connect with my audience. So I think connection, intent, intent comes from connection with all of those aspects. And I was thinking also when we were all talking, I was thinking about, Joseph, that I love Kate Bush. I've been a fan of hers since I was about 12. And I had a video, old cassette video given to me for my birthday one year, years and years ago. And she'd just done Sensual World. And there was an interview on it. And she was asked what was her inspirations. And she was just talking about how it was, from books she's read, from, films that she's watched. It's from just ideas and concepts that she's interested in, newspaper reports, it's just really multi-dimensional. And it suddenly occurred to me that, my sort of idol, for want of a better word, someone who I've always looked to as someone that I have adored as a creative being, I'm now, as a creative artist, sort of doing exactly the same. I didn't do it consciously, though. It's only recently I've recognized the connection with my muse back when I was 12, showing me the way to be a creative human, and how I am now. So I think it's a really interesting question. And when Kenneth said that it was about creative intent, I thought, oh, I like this, because I feel really comfortable with the way that I connect with my art, and and I think that's really helpful to those looking at it as well. And I loved what Kenneth said about Donna's characters making him feel safe, and that's what I kind of want for my audience as well. When they're looking at the owl, they're like, or the whatever animal, they're feeling that sense of safety, that they can explore the meanings behind it, and the emotions and feelings that it might conjure up in a safe way. And by the way, Donna, I'm an absolute fan of Cozy Mysteries, so please tell me your surname and I shall be reading you next.
Thanks, that's a nice thought.
But Donna, go ahead, because people will want to look. What is your name?
My pen name is my name, Donna Houston, Huston, Murray, Murray. And there are 8 cozies and 3 thrillers and a standalone called Dying for a Vacation. So, and by the way, thanks for the kind words, Ken. I'd love to know what you're reading. Tell me later.
Now, Sarah, I just wanted to say something in response to you, and then I know Rick has something he wants to say. You probably have articulated in this wonderful way you have of not saying it, but saying it, that all of us at some level, for us, the creation of art involves an intent to reach something I call the sacred. You could also call it the universal, the archetypal, whatever you want, but that all of us are in this striving to connect the other through us with the more. Yeah. And I think that's really, I want to thank you for making that point. Rick, would you like to say something?
Sure, thank you. First, I absolutely agree with virtually everything that's been said so far. It all makes a lot of sense and all resonates with me. my 2 cents on artistic intent is I think it's also intertwined with two other words, integrity and inspiration. And if I could relate an experience that I've just had on that, we'll see if it makes any sense. Um, the good news in my life is on Friday the 13th, two different publications accepted two different stories. And I only had one sale before my entire life. Go, hey, it's supposed to work this way. It's supposed to be this easy. Of course, those stories had been rejected a dozen times each. But let's talk about one of those stories. It's called The Blacksmith. That's a story I actually wrote in high school. I was a senior in high school when I was 18. And the title, The Blacksmith, just came as an inspiration to me. And then the idea of what that meant was additional, inspirations. And I basically wrote a flash fiction, about 1,000 words. Never submitted it, nothing. And then after I wrote my novel, which is still trying to find a home, I was advised to, hey, try to get some stories published to build up some credibility when you're looking for an agent. So I wrote a few new stories, and I rehashed a couple of stories I wrote a long time ago. One of those old stories was my first publication with the Rabbit Hole anthology, but The Blacksmith, I submitted and submitted and submitted, rejected. I thought, gee, that's a pretty good flash fiction. I also polished up a little bit. The main revision I made was give it more integrity, have the main character be a World War I veteran, which then made a lot more sense for the things that happened to him. A publication called Calliope, if I'm pronouncing it right, sent me a rejection after 8 months, but I was astounded. It said, gee, this has a lot of potential. Please feel free to resubmit this to us, rewritten or re-edited. I've never had that before. It's always thanks, but no thanks, or pretty good, but no thanks. But I thought, well, my story was already good. It had a great ending. It had an O. Henry type ending. It's flash fiction. And I didn't know if there'd be any integrity if I changed it at all. But since I had nothing else to lose, I began to see if I could do something. And yeah, inspiration came to me as to what happened next to this character. What happened next? And it maintained the integrity of the story. And so it ended up being about not quite 4,000 words, and it got a few more rejections, although they would say, very good, but no thanks, but send us some more stuff. But then on the 13th, a podcast, a creepy podcast said, yeah, we want to produce your story. They said that they only wanted one narrator, and I had 6 other people talking, although 3 of the people talking were only saying 1 or 2 sentences. So they changed all that. And I was thinking, does that ruin the integrity? And I thought, well, not really, because I wrote this to be read, and they're doing this as a single narrative performance. So that's not really changing the integrity. And so what was my intent? My intent was to write a story that I liked, a story that people would find interesting. And so I just really think that for people like us, I think it's inspiration and its integrity is always part of our intent. That's sort of my 2 cents.
Rick, I have the feeling that you, like most of us, I mean, reality is we all love our art. I don't know, I suppose I could write and just pile papers in my closet and be happy that I've written them. But I have the feeling one of the things you're reminding of us all of is we want to be published, we want to be seen, we want our performances attended. we want people to go to the movie theater, buy their popcorn, sit in those seats. We want to be part of the discourse and not just creating art to be hidden in the cave someplace. And thank you for reminding us of that. Joe, I think you had your hand up next.
Yeah, thanks. Couple of things. Somebody, I think it was, might have been Sabine, mentioned escapism. What we do is kind of escapism. Um, and I remember a long, long time ago, I was writing the core pieces for several of my books, and I was in a workshop, and one of the people in the workshop uh, very, very loudly and very aggressively said, "You don't write escapist literature. You want people to think." And there's a problem with that. I can escape quite easily when I'm thinking. You know, the more I'm drawn into a novel, the more I've escaped. And if a story or a novel or a movie or a play has me actually thinking, absorbing, you know, that is being exafferent. That is where I'm interacting with it. You can't do that with a TV show. You can sit there and go, boy, dude, that was stupid. But um, you can't really interact the way you can, even if you're in the audience of a play, because the actors hear you laughing at the good jokes. They hear you screaming at the exciting parts. They hear you crying at the sad parts. Um, and if you're in a musical performance, the crowd stands up and they're applauding like crazy, or they're singing along with you. That to me is magic. So the concept of escapism, I think that's different for a lot of different people. And for me, escapism is getting so totally absorbed in what I'm interacting with that I've totally lost this reality. Uh, I wanted to talk a bit about what Sarah said, and I noticed Sabine nodding vigorously. When I first started with the intention of, I'm going to be an author, yeah, yeehaw. There would be moments where, as Sarah was saying, the goddess, the sacred, the more would just descend on me. And I was gone. I was typing as fast as I could. I couldn't keep up with what was going on, you know. Um, some of it was brilliant, might have taken 20 years to get, 30 years to get published. But what cracks me up is once it was published, it was always anthologized several times and in several places. So nobody wanted it, nobody wanted it, nobody wanted it. Now everybody wants it. Okay, great, good. I'm glad. Why did it took you so long? Some of it was, even though I'll say it was the muse, the goddess, helping me, guiding me, it was more for me to work things out, to explore something. Not to say that that stuff's unpublishable. It's just I have to be very selective about what markets I send it to. But I recognize that now. Stephen King had this great line in a presentation he was doing. A lot of people sit down and wait for inspiration. The rest of us just get to work. Because when you are a full-time author, when putting words, being on screen or on stage, producing art is what you do. And that's how you make your income. That's your source of income. It's not a matter of, well, I hope I'm in the mood today and come up with something clever. No, it's okay, this editor wants 500 words by 5 o'clock. I got to produce. Or, I have a commercial. I got two really good commercial offers, and that's going to, take care of my bills for the next month, whatever. I managed to sell artwork. I managed to sell 3 pieces of artwork, so, I'm good. But one thing I have noticed is as I work harder and harder to learn my craft, to develop my style, to perfect my voice, the whatever it is, I've learned I have more and more of an ability to literally put it on like a cloak. I can switch and become that thing which produces, which is, in which channels. And I'm very curious to know if there's anybody else who has been able to sense that's what it is. That's what it's like. Can I do that when I want to, when I need to? I'm learning how to do that. So that there may be times I get up in the morning and I'm sitting down and, oh God, and I just go, okay, well, I do some breathing and exercises, I do some meditation, and boom, I'm right there again. And I'm able to just begin cranking. And I know cranking may not be a term you want to apply when you're being the medium, the maximum, the minimum, whatever. But I can't speak, I don't know for the rest of you, I would love to know when I do that, get out of my way. Susan will have to throw things at me. She used to have to flick the lights on and off to get my attention. Now she just comes over and waves her hand in front of me and I'm like, get out of the way, come on, I'm doing something here. So I'm very curious to know if anybody else has that experience. And if you have something similar, what's it like? And how does it manifest? And can you use it? Can you bring it forward? I would imagine, Sabine, that's something that, okay, we're going to be on film now. We're going to be taping. Boom. Yeah. So that's what I was curious about. Thank you.
An observation,
Exactly.
folks.
You
and
gave
then we'll-
your answer. You gave the answer, Joseph. That's what you have to be able, if you do acting professionally, you have to do it all the time. I don't know, you have a children's play on, you get up at 7, which is really early for me, and you have to be on stage and in character at 10 and perform for the children. Or if, I don't know, you're saying goodbye to your little boy, saying, goodbye, my darling, have a great day at the kindergarten, and then you go kill someone on command, so to say. Yeah, you have to be able to do that. And and it is, I have to say, the more you do it, the easier it becomes.
Killing somebody becomes easy, does it? That's
I have
scary.
to interrupt here, folks, and in case you don't know Joseph Carabas, okay, you just saw him at his finest. Okay, one of the reasons we have this monthly show is there are all these questions worth discussing. And this man, this genius, just gave a list of three new topics that we could have for the show. Okay, as I took my notes, okay, as an artist, finding your audience or market. Okay, is it commerce or art? And struggle with finding your artistic being, or is it an easy being that we just put our magic cloak on? 3 great, incredible topics. So, folks, you want to come back every month because you never know what this guy is going to get us thinking about next. But we want to keep us in order. And Liz, I know you had a question you wanted to ask or something you wanted to say.
Yes. I was thinking, it struck me something from what the Bean, I think, sorry, which one be your name? Sarah. We're talking about connection with audiences, and also from what Donna was saying. And because I write genre fiction, and it was about authorial intent, it was also the message for the audience, because, and I'll give an example, there's a British fantasy writer called Terry Pratchett, don't know if you've heard of him, and he wrote parodies really of what were like supposedly epic fantasy novels, and in it he, with a very light hand, would touch on things to make people think things about racism and prejudice and so on, the class system. But I noticed as the books progressed and he got older, this sort of message became more and more overt. And he by the end, I felt like he was giving you a lecture. He was preaching to you, and it was becoming. It wasn't. It wasn't the entertainment value was going down, and I just thought he'd lost the balance of being able to get his message out to people without them feeling I'm just being given a lecture all the time. And I just thought it was an interesting thing that sometimes it reminded me of the 19th century, that writers thought it was their duty to educate their readers and always give them the moral high story and have a strong moral to their story. And I just thought it's interesting how far, when you're actually your themes and your message, how far can you push your message without alienating your audience or it just becoming a piece of propaganda?
I think that's a very good point. And of course, at one point, we all wanted propaganda. And if you look back on even some of the great poetry of the Elizabethan age, it really was celebration of the empire, celebration of the explorations, things like that. And, now we want true stories and we want people to see people. And I think this is part of it. We want to see people who are more real. We want to see a world that we can connect with more and fantasize about less, perhaps. And yeah, you don't want too much preaching in your prose anymore. But geez, I loved Conrad and I loved Steinbeck, and I even can tolerate Ayn Rand. I don't know about you folks. Amy, you had something you wanted to introduce?
Yeah, so I wrote my first book. Well, it's actually at the publisher right now, so it's not technically a book yet. But I wrote full time for 1 year, Monday through Friday, and I had to kind of what Sabine was talking about, like when it was time for me to sit down and write, I needed to block out the entire world and sort of like become invisible to them so that I could be completely like in tune with what I was writing. And um, a lot of the book is like parts of my life, little teaching lessons, mythology, spirituality. Um, but one of the things that was frustrating to me throughout my life is when things didn't make sense. Like I had this overwhelming desire to make things make sense. So when I was writing, I still had that desire to make it make sense. Like when somebody just does something absolutely horrible, you go, well, why? That doesn't make sense. So I had to figure out how to make it make sense to the reader. And as I was doing that, it was like everything started to flow out of my hands and onto the paper. And as soon as it would make sense and I would finish that section or whatever, I knew I wasn't done because I could still feel all the tension inside of me if I wasn't done. And if I got stuck, I'd go for a walk around the lake. And usually something in nature would like distract me because I didn't want any humans to distract me, obviously. And so like I think God just sent little like birds and trees and whatever else, like, hey, pay attention to this over here. And as soon as I started paying attention to something else is when I figured out, this is how it all makes sense. And I would go back, and when I got to the end of that section, I felt this huge release. And most of the time, whether it was a happy section or a sad section, I would like cry. And because it was such a release because it made sense, it looked good, it sounded good, and the reader would be able to understand what I was saying and make everything make sense. And all of that unsense making, whatever, however you might say that, it made perfect sense. And I could let go of that little bit of anxiety that I had about the past. So I think that's similar. You said you would evoke a goddess or something. Well, apparently. Apparently animals come to me and have conversations along the same lines.
I can relate to that. I run away from home sometimes when I'm really stuck. I just I'll go someplace else, stay overnight in a hotel or something, just to let the muse find me. Uh, but I think that's very interesting because I'm curious, how many of us want our work to necessarily make sense, and how many of us really are writing on the edge of what I call magical realism, which I know is a technical term, but we're hoping that we're just at the edge where it might make sense, but it might not, and that might and might is kind of what gives it power. Or in other words, I'm back in those caves again, drawing the animal in the hope that my drawing is somehow going to make it appear so I can shoot it.
I actually had a similar thing to that, which you said standing on the edge. So I live about a mile or two from the Cape Fear River. And and I didn't grow up here. So everything I've learned about living on the coast and the ocean, everything is just different, especially the geography. So when I would hike down to the river, you had to watch when the tides, you had to watch when the tides were changing. And, you know, if you use that as a metaphor, the tides changing inside of you. Well, when I would watch for the tides changing, I say, oh, it's okay. It's time for me to go back. But I learned how to listen for the tides changing instead of watching. And the Cape Fear has incredible tides, like ferocious tides, like you will die if you don't get out of there. And I was listening and I could hear the tides changing, but I was finding fossils and I thought, it's okay. I have 15 more minutes. And I wasn't paying attention to the time because I was completely consumed with these fossils that I was finding. And when I looked up, the tide had come in. And so instead of walking back on the shore, I was running full speed through about 2 feet of water, hoping I wasn't going to get washed away and die. And so it sort of stayed with me like, hey, Amy, the tides are changing. Like if you stay, there's danger. If you leave, it's safe. And that just sort of like stuck with me. So whenever I hear the tide changing, I kind of smile to myself like, well, it's okay. It's time for me to go.
Well, could you tell our audience where the Cape Fear is? Because not everybody knows.
So the Cape Fear is like it's on the coast of the Atlantic and it's almost on the border of North Carolina and South Carolina. And what people don't realize is this is a massive, deep river, and it was one of the major points of import from Europe, like along with like New York, Baltimore, and Charleston. And it goes all the way up to the mountains in North Carolina. So when you come down in here and it's three rivers all converge into one river, and then you can see the shoals from outer space. The shoals are so treacherous and they go out about 30 miles. So the reason they call it the Cape Fear is when you were sailing your ships in, if you knew the area, there's a very small window of opportunity to get across the shoals and go up the Cape Fear. And if you miss that window of opportunity, you will sink your own ship. And, huh?
And pirates used to, knowing that, used to hang out there and kind of try and deter ships so that they would end up on the shoals, because that was the easiest way.
Yeah. Blackbeard was captured not about an hour and a half north of here. He knew this coastline in and out, and he knew. And there's at the museum there's this amazing map with all of the shipwrecks along the East Coast. I mean, you would be baffled to see all the dots, and it has the name of the ship if they know it and the year that it sank. And I think he was probably responsible for quite a few during his time period of terror.
And I'm going to say, Amy, you gave such a good description of it. I'm going to excuse you, even though you left Boston out of the list of great harbors.
Oh, I'm sorry. I do like tea parties.
I think, though, you've just raised something I'd like other people to respond to. We've been talking about theater and writing and all, and providing safety. But we're also providing danger. It's that wonderful yin yang, isn't it? So would people like to talk a little bit more about the sense of danger that you're creating in your art? Any volunteers?
Oh, did you want to say something, Donna?
Yeah, I couldn't find the button. I once had somebody think that one of my fight scenes was hilarious. That was not what I was aiming for. Yeah, it's a trick, writing frightening things and getting it right.
Mark, I would think that when people are writing music, composing music, listening to music, it might not be a sense of danger, but it would be like a sense of anticipation or aggression or like getting people riled up or something, or versus calm down. Or do you know what I'm trying to ask?
You mean in performance?
Well, like, when you listen to certain music, like your heart races and you want to get up and you want to move things, and maybe like, maybe you want to drive your car faster or run down the road, or, when you don't like go listening to soothing, calm meditation music at the gym. That would be counterproductive. So that might not be danger, but it is aggression, right? Energy, movement.
Yeah, I think it depends. I mean, I think actually this connects back to the beginning of the conversation. I think it depends on your intent. I think it depends on whatever persona you happen to be inhabiting. I think it depends on how you feel. Connected to, I think, what Joseph was saying about writing as a profession. This may be a bad paraphrase, but Miles Davis said something along the lines of, it's 1 in 50 performances in which musicians play completely out of their minds. But it's the other 49 by which they earn the right to call themselves professionals. And I think, too, that may be connected to what you were asking a moment ago, Ken, about, and I'm going to paraphrase this a little bit, I guess. Whether we feel like, I'll use writing, whether we're conforming or whether we feel like we might be onto something different. And the person who came to mind for me was William Faulkner. And the work of his that we consider to be now the best and most influential was intended to be deliberately experimental. A lot of it, believe it or not, he wrote while he was working as a security guard, like a night security job. And he got to a point at which he believed he was enough of a writer that he just stopped paying attention to publishers and editors, and he just wrote. Mm-hmm. So if there's a line there somewhere, I have no idea where it is, but sometimes it's just, I guess it's almost like fishing. I mean, you just got to cast it out there and see if anybody bites.
Joseph, you had something you wanted to.
Well, I do have something prior, but Amy, if I understood your question correctly about music, perhaps in your travels and your experiences, you can recognize that music is culturally based. And, you know, if you've studied ethnomusicology, Western musical tradition has to have very, very loud when you're in a church, specifically in a Christian-based church, the music, the praise of God, you have to be screaming at the top of your lungs practically to get this out there. Whereas in Asian traditions, no, when you want to show that you're communing with whatever, it tends to be very, very quiet. It does tend to be reflective because Asian traditions, I want to hear what the universe is saying. I know what I got to say. I want to hear what the universe is saying. You know, whereas Western traditions, oh my God, what's God going to tell me today? You know, and then you don't listen to it, right? So, plus it also goes into music theory because starting around basically 1550, 1560, we as a Western society began learning what sounds meant what to us emotionally. So it is possible for a composer to put something down and know that that's going to cause people to be very tense, very emotional, very excited, very aggressive, very assertive. One of the modern masters of that is Paul Simon, who really goes amazing. He blends all sorts of musical influences into his work. You know, so that might be something worth studying. I'll leave it there. I'm done. Donna had something she wanted to bring in.
This was back a couple thoughts. I was thinking of Alfred Hitchcock's description of how to create suspense, which was to put a time bomb under a table where two people are sitting there talking about baseball or something like that. And the audience is thinking, but this bomb's going to go off. You just, watch out. And it created a great deal of tension in the audience. And since that's what I do, is write suspense novels sometimes, I was trying to learn from that.
I wanted to say something about the music topic. I'm reached that age. I don't know about anybody else here. I've reached that age where I watch television with closed caption. And if you do, in this country, in the United States, when there's music, background music, the closed captioning tells you what you're supposed to be feeling. Anxious music, anticipatory music, happy music. But in a way, I think, and this goes back to Alfred Hitchcock and your comment about him. The arts interact, obviously. They're not separate. And I think movies in particular, and now television and recording, they've all influenced other things. So, for example, the rhythm with which we write words in writing novels now has changed from the rhythm when people thought listening to Mozart was, the proper way, or Beethoven. Now we write in a different tempos. I think the same thing can be said about the music, that how we write, the culture, as Joseph said, culture tells us about music, but also music and culture interact, and our expectations, our understanding of music changes. And I think that that's part of the whole study of arts. I guess that's the only justification I can give for anybody ever getting an MFA or something, is that they're supposed to be studying all that stuff while the rest of us are busy trying to sculpt that piece of rock into something. They're telling us why it's meaningful. Donna, you had something you wanted to add, and then I think Joseph, you did.
I covered it, thanks.
Donna?
Keep on talking, Don. I got to do something else
I
here.
covered it, I'm,
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. Your
thanks,
hands
Joe.
up. Okay, Joseph?
Um, well, we had mentioned previously about speaking as an author, putting something in which makes the reader respond a certain way. I work at that. And one of my great joys was a first reader for one of my novels contacted me and she said, I had to stop reading the first chapter. I went, oh, God, did it suck that bad? And then she very quickly added, I picked it up about 5 hours later, but what you wrote was so terrifying to me, I couldn't continue reading it. And I went, yes, yes. And that to me was a real success point. That to me said, yeah, okay, I'm there. I'm doing my job. And I've repeatedly, this comes up a lot. People will say, how do you create such evil bastard prick villains? And Susan will very often say, oh, well, that's somebody you knew. Yeah, of course it was, right? It was somebody I knew. And I modified them slightly, or I melded a bunch of evil people, of people who had done wrong. Because one of the things about creating characters, nobody is 100% evil. If you look at all the Bond villains, they were always stroking a cat, or they were always painting. They were doing something which humanized them, because a 1 or 2-dimensional character doesn't get you very far. So if you want to create evil, you have to show the contrast that there is some good in that evil. If you want to create a really, another comment I get a lot is that my characters are so morally ambiguous. They're someone said to me very, very pointedly, they're so human. Thanks. Good. Yeah, I've arrived. Okay. But to the point of crafting for an emotion, and this goes back to Sabine and Sarah, and I think everyone else actually talking about pulling from within to connect without, pulling from what's in here to get others to connect. I will write a highly emotional scene, whatever the emotion is. And if I'm registering emotion, writing it, then I know 9 times out of 10, the reader will have that emotion when they're reading it. They will respond with the same emotion. Of course, over time, and I'm sure this is true for everyone, regardless of what media they're in, you learn over time how to convey your pain without saying, I'm in pain. You learn how to convey your joy without saying you're joyful. So in the case of an actor, body movement, how you deliver a dialogue, how you deliver a phrase. In the case of art, I'm sure there are colors, much like with music. There's a tradition of art that indicates to you this is a color which will cause people to be happy or joyous. Maybe I'm mistaken. I don't know. Maybe these are colors which cause people to be sad, glum. For an author, it's the words we choose, the structure we put them in. But it's, and again, it all comes back to, are you willing to put on the cloak? Are you willing to be that channel, to be that voice, that mouthpiece, that hand?
But that's one of those topics that really have got to have a show about. But I wanted to mention we're kind of running out of time, and we have a few people's hands up. So, Sarah, I think you were next.
Thank you. Just wanted to say about you were talking about danger and how you put that in your art and writing and so on. I don't really go there myself because I have done in the past, and I didn't like, I personally don't like the attention that draws, the conflict of opinions and feelings and the triggering that I caused. It was really awful on one piece of my art, very early days, when I was experimenting with different genres and so on. So, there's places for artists to be edgy. I just am not. I just wanted to say that was all.
Each of us has our own level of edginess too. For you, what's edgy, your edgy is probably very different from, say, Picasso's Guernica.
Yeah.
Doesn't end up being edgy. Sabanet, did you have something you wanted to?
Yeah, I was just saying as adding a little thought to color. Think of film. One of the major important parts in post-production is the color grading for the creation of danger or whatever, or unease, or that is an extremely that I don't know much about. I can't talk about this, but obviously it makes a whole big difference.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, my wife is a painter, by the way. I don't talk about her work much, but one of the most fascinating things for me is that we had one gallery they still represent her here in Arizona, in Scottsdale. And the woman refused a painting, the gallery owner, because it was purple. She said, purple doesn't sell. And so we took the painting someplace else, and it sold within 2 days. And so, one of the things that's fascinating to me is that notion of what color does mean. And it's like sound. It's like what Joseph was saying about Asian prayer versus European. It depends finding who's your audience for that particular color, who loves that color. But you're absolutely right. The people I know who are in post-production film work talk a lot about the color hue. And I'm sure, the lighting. Hey, how much time is spent deciding how the lighting's going to be done on stage?
Same on film.
Yeah, sweet.
Yeah. Well, one last word to danger. I want to say one more thing to this. To create danger, or for us as an actor, it's usually in the writing. But what we can add is a certain rhythm in the performance, is a certain rhythm or breaks. Not saying the word, starting with body language, and maybe never saying the word if the director agrees. Yeah, but that all comes down to one thing, I think, all across whatever art, whatever we create, that danger belongs into the category for me of unease, uncomfortable, unpredictable. And that's provocative. And I think if a man or a woman wants to move on, and if we want to evolve, that only happens with provocation. That only happens with discomfort. That doesn't happen if everything's hunky-dory all the time, right? So I think it is an essential part, whether or not it's liked or popular. I would go so far as to say it's a responsibility that we have.
Yes. But just to go back and kind of smooth the water here, that's true whether we're talking about My Fair Lady or Equus. It's true whether we're talking about an owl being found in the middle of an abstract or Guernica. Okay, for one person, what is provocative and making us think and making us react often has to be at a lot cooler temperature than something that's going to make somebody else react. I think, Sabanet, you and I tend to prefer that real high intensity. I think that Donna and Sarah tend to seem to prefer a lower, but that doesn't make either less true. I think the real thing is to find what it is you can produce and the level of discomfort you can produce that will work. And Mark, I see your hand is up, and I want to make sure.
Yeah, I'll be as quick as I can. This is related to Joseph's point about loud music and your point, Ken, about closed captions. So I have an answer for you. And the other thing, I think actually it might bring us back to the very beginning and authorial intent. I don't know what streaming channels anybody has access to, but I happened to watch a series on Amazon Prime called World's Most Evil Prisoners. And I watched the program the other night about a guy in the United States named James Robertson. And there was something really, really familiar about that. So I went back to another series that I'd already watched on Netflix called I Am a Killer. And James Robertson had actually been profiled on both of those. And when I rewatched him on I Am a Killer, he was a much, much more sympathetic character. This is a guy who had spent 37 years, in incarceration, close to 20 of them in what they call close management, CM, solitary confinement. And he found that to be utterly inhumane and wanted to get out of there. So when he was released into another level of close management and had a cellmate, he murdered his cellmate so he could be put on death row. But in I Am a Killer, they interviewed family members of his who had found him to be a much less menacing character and actually found redeeming qualities in the guy, which were not apparent at all in the Amazon series about World's Most Evil Prisoners. So I think that takes us back to authorial intent. The folks who made that Amazon series had a completely different intent from the folks who made the Netflix series.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And yeah, I mean, we as artists are doing that. We are creating, and we want our audiences to react. I just wish, just as an aside, I wish we had a dance person here for this conversation today.
I'll try to
Because
get Gina back.
I think the intent in dance, and when Sabanet was talking about the body language and the sense of danger, and when you have really wonderful modern ballet and there's supposed to be conveying danger, I mean, it's breath-stopping. When it's done well, it is just absolutely incredibly breath-stopping. Joseph, I think you added something you want to say, and I'm going to let you have the last word. But I did want to mention to folks that this show goes on every month, last Thursday of the month, and next month's Thursday is Halloween. So we want to invite you to come in costume if you want to come on. Please join us. Not just to listen, but, let us know you want to join the show and be part of the discussion. We love adding people. And the other thing is, because it is Halloween, I believe our topic is going to be humor, which is really kind of a great topic. And by chance, I'm going to get to moderate 2 in a row. It's not typical, folks. So don't expect this is not my moderating show. It just happens that my friend, who is a specialist on humor, is our guest. So, but Joseph, I'm going to turn it to you.
Thank you, sir. I wanted to add one more thing. Amy, you made a note about provocative. And Another master of soundscapes is John Williams.
Hmm.
And I saw him interviewed once, and one of the things he said was that Jaws was the first movie where the director said, I want the sound, I want the music for this to be another character in the movie.
Hmm.
And there have been some amazing musical scores for previous movies, but they were intended to be background. They were intended to fill in the mood, to fill in the character who was on the screen. The Third Man is probably one of the best examples of that. But with Jaws, he was specifically told, I want that music to be a character. I want people to react to the music as if it's a character. And I don't know anybody who does not respond to the bassoon. Ba-bum, 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 ba-bum. You know, he captured it. But the point to that is he knew that a single bass note repeated is like footsteps, ominous footsteps. That's what it is in our psyches, in Western psyche. And he put it in. You know, I forgot who the composer was. The opening three measures to their piece is a piccolo. Tchaikovsky. He has a piccolo start in one of his pieces. And he did that because that was the sound the birds made. And he wanted it to be a spring day. Mm-hmm. And I just thought, okay, you know, I've heard music which sounded like dogs barking, intentionally so. And I'm, you know, is Boo okay? What the hell's going on? But again, that's cultural. That's very much what we have been trained to do. But you can very specifically use music to create certain moods and have people respond. You can steer people through music. A whole part of propaganda training is learning what music to use to evoke moods. You know, if you want your audience to be up and excited and ready to do something, the last thing you want to do is have a nice mellow tune in the background. It encourages people to fall asleep. However, if you don't want anybody to respond to the plea you're making, and this goes into marketing psychology, you'll have a very evocative speaker with a very droll background, a very quiet, droll, major chord background, so that the person lulls off to sleep as this guy's going on about, we need to do this and that. Mm-hmm. And that was in Citizen Kane, used in Citizen Kane to great effect. Anyway, we are.
I just want to make one comment about Jaws. I actually have friends who have refused to go in salt water since 1975. will not.
Understood.
That includes a swimming pool, right? Saltwater swimming pool.
No, they're all right with that.
I thought they might be afraid of the Snickers bar or whatever it is from Caddyshack.
Anybody else? We are coming up on 3:00 here in the East Coast, which is time an hour and a half. This has been a wonderful session. Anybody else with a closing remark?
Mm-mm.
Kenneth, I'd like to thank you. This has been a great conversation. I especially want to thank you for pointing out that I am a genius. I have some great ideas. Oh, come on. Everybody's smiling. Good. Thank God. Next month, humor on Halloween. Be sure to wear your best costumes, folks. I'll be coming dressed as a human being.
Oh my God, I've never seen him that way.
Yeah, I know, really. Thank you all. Please come back, tell your friends, tell anyone who's interested. You all know the join link. It's the same every month. Take care, all. Have a good day. Bye-bye.
Bye, folks.
Bye.
Thank you for watching Roundtable 360, where creatives from diverse fields and across the globe gather to discuss what's relevant, irrelevant, serious, and fun. Roundtable 360 is brought to you by Biz Catalyst 360 and Northern Lights Publishing. Our shows are taped the last Thursday of every month at 7:30 a.m. Hawaiian time, 10:30 a.m. Pacific time, 1:30 p.m. Eastern time, 6:30 p.m. London time, 19 hours 30 minutes Central European Standard Time, and whatever time that converts to wherever you are. Please join us at http://nlb.pub/roundtable. That address is on your screen. See you next time, and until then, stay well and safe.